Hello everyone. Today we are going to do something a little different on the channel. I'm going to bring you a small series that I'm going to release every so often about some dreams that I've had. Now the nice thing about these dreams is I've actually already written several of them into book form. I've actually published them and I have had some fun sharing them with other people. But today I found a new way to share them with the world. I love audiobooks. I love listening to audiobooks, and I love reading regular books. And I love YouTube, and I have a YouTube channel. So, you put those things together, and what have I come up with? I'm going to do a little audiobook presentation for you with a few visual cues to help out. So today, we are going to read a spine-chilling tale that I had a dream when I was 11 years old. Most adults that have read this book have said it's too scary for them and they won't read it again. You know, being 11, I had that same feeling. It took me a lot of years to be able to explain this one out and write it down. So if you can't make it through the whole listening, that's okay. I applaud you for trying. But if you stay till the end, you'll have one heck of a story to tell. So without further ado, we're going to begin reading The Cabin by Joe West. Chapter 1. Savannah turned 11 years old just a week ago, but she acts more mature than her age. She's never had many friends. Her best friend is her dog, Daisy, a border collie. Today they are riding in the back seat of their family station wagon, winding through the backwoods of Colorado. The woods seem bigger and denser than she's used to. The back roads her dad has taken today are winding like an ugly gray snake in a sea of dark green. Sunshine graces her jet black hair as it whips into her face, causing her to pull it back and slip on a ponytail. Daisy is perfectly content sticking her head out of the window and ignoring Savannah. Savannah is a quiet child and doesn't speak out much. She is simply enjoying the ride, watching the trees. She can't help but feel eerie while observing the woods. She's always had a feeling something is watching her. She's never been able to shake this feeling. Her parents are not talking much either. Bode, her dad's dog, is sitting like a regal knight between her mom and dad in the front seat, looking straight ahead. He is a large blue merle Australian shepherd. Such a stoic dog if there ever was one. Bode is definitely a great friend, like Daisy. Savannah has always felt at ease around both dogs. The forest is thick with evergreens, a sporadic patch of aspens here and there. It is getting darker and more ominous by the minute. Savannah becomes more uncomfortable. No one else seems to have much of an issue. None of them have been to this cabin in the woods before, and Savannah is not sure how or why they're coming here now. They never do stuff like this. She continues to be optimistic about it, though. She wants to just enjoy the day, even though she feels as if multiple eyes leer at her from the woods. Her dad slows down and turns into a small driveway made of gravel. The tiny rocks plink into the fenders as he drives down the lonesome road under the trees. Savannah has the sudden urge to speak due to the forest closing in around them, but she knows she'll just be told to be kept quiet. Barely any rays of sunlight beam through the canopy. As he drives, Savannah's stomach begins to churn, almost like the feeling of being homesick. Just as she is starting to feel the urge to throw up, she sees a bright light ahead of them as the trees clear. The car pulls up to an old, odd-looking cabin and stops. The cabin sits in an open circle surrounded by the disturbing forest. Savannah feels somewhat safe in the middle of the clearing, though. It looks like a mix between a dark-colored log cabin and an old Victorian house. It has 2 stories which show a modern flair. Her parents get out and look at the cabin. "Ain't she a beaut?" her dad asks. Savannah and her mom only nod as they stare at it. The cabin seems to welcome them, inviting them to a sanctuary within this evil forest. Her dad opens the back of the station wagon and grabs all the bags, setting them on the ground. Daisy and Bo jump out of the car and run around the yard, having the time of their lives. They smell everything around them, marking their territory. Maybe this isn't so bad after all. I'm just being paranoid and fearful of nothing, she thinks to herself. Savannah grabs her bag and follows behind her parents, who are already inside the cabin. Walking towards the cabin, the sun is slipping into the trees behind her. It must be early evening, Savannah surmises. Savannah walks in the open front door of the cabin and finds it even more beautiful inside than out. In the entryway, there's plenty of room to move. Straight ahead, she sees her mom moving around in the kitchen. On either side of the kitchen entry, there are 2 sets of stairways leading to the second level. They are well made of some kind of dark cherry wood logs with safety banisters. To her right is a dining room with an elegant chandelier hanging in the middle over the table. She looks upstairs from the entryway and can see there are 2 rooms directly in the corners where the stairs meet on the second level. The other 2 rooms are more towards the front of the cabin. She looks to her left and sees what appears to be a family room with plenty of furniture. She moves slowly into the family room, looking. As soon as she enters, her father almost bumps into her. "Sorry, kiddo, didn't see you there. Why don't you take your bag upstairs and find yourself a room? There are 4 rooms, so pick any one except the one directly above me. Being an only child has its perks, you know?" Savannah nods and turns to leave the room, taking her bag with her. She sees Daisy and Bo laying in the entryway and starts to head upstairs. "Come on, Daisy, let's go find our room," she says as she turns back to her companion. Daisy pops up, wagging her tail, and follows dutifully. They ascend the stairs together and turn right at the corner to the room opposite of where her parents will sleep. The upstairs loft area, with its wrapping walkway, ends before reaching the front of the cabin, leaving an opening above the dining and family rooms, leaving plenty of room to maneuver things around upstairs. Savannah opens the door and walks into the room. Once inside, she looks around to see a drab room with an antique-style dresser and bed. Beside the bed is a vintage nightstand with a single lamp. She leaves her bag and runs out of the room to see if the other rooms are better than this one. After checking the other 2 rooms and finding them with the same decor, she decides to keep the room where her bag awaits. Savannah runs downstairs in search of her mom. In the kitchen, she finds her mom unpacking several boxes for their stay. "Mom, are we having any more food tonight?" Her mom looks at her with a hint of contempt. "No, dear. We ate back at the restaurant in Almont before coming up here. That way we don't have to cook tonight. Besides, you should go unpack your bag. It'll be time for bed soon. It's going to be an early start tomorrow, so you need to get a good night's rest." She turns away from Savannah without another word or thought. Savannah suddenly doesn't feel at ease inside the cabin anymore. She goes back to the entryway with Daisy following. Savannah wants to let Daisy out before going upstairs to unpack. She notices all the inside lights are on. She opens the front door and Daisy runs outside. It's pitch black. Have I really been inside that long? Savannah thinks to herself. She stands in the doorway watching Daisy run around, smelling things. Savannah looks into the night and turns on the front porch light to see better. The forest seems to be so close, and almost like it moved closer to the cabin since nightfall. Chills run up and down her spine. The cold night bites at her toes. She's about to call Daisy in when she looks up to see eyes leering at her. Red, blistered eyes stare back at her from the woods. Daisy starts to growl. Her fur raises on her back. "Come here, Daisy. Now!" Daisy obeys and quickly runs inside. Savannah slams the front door and locks it. She breathes heavily. Sweat falls from her forehead onto the floor. Panic assails her as she feels like this whole trip was a bad idea. "Good night, dear. You should go to bed now," she hears her mom say from upstairs as the door to her parents' room closes. Savannah panics more than she feels. It can't be that late already. Her dad always stays up late. She looks around at the room downstairs. All the lights are off, except for the main entry light where she is standing. Savannah hurriedly takes the stairs up with Daisy hot on her tracks to go to her room. She shuts the door quickly and locks it. Normally, she never locks her bedroom door. At home, she feels safe. Here, she doesn't. This place is not right. Something is wrong, and Savannah feels it. She runs to the curtain and closes them. She turns on the lamp next to her bed and opens her bag. She pulls out her pajamas and quickly changes. She turns off the main light against her better judgment and jumps into bed. "Daisy, come here, girl," she says, patting the bed. Daisy hops on the bed with the invitation, curling up at Savannah's feet. "Let's go to sleep and forget about tonight. Maybe things will be better tomorrow." She pulls up the covers, closes her eyes, waiting for tonight to be over. Sleep soon comes. Chapter 2. Savannah's eyes open wide. She is drenched with sweat. Panic covers her worse than her blanket. What awoke her? She isn't sure, but she knows something must have caused it because Daisy is sitting up, staring at the door, on alert. Even hot, she keeps the covers on because her fear has her frozen in place. Is this a dream? Am I awake? She wonders while her eyes grip the door ahead of her. She hears a noise outside her door like nails clicking on the floor. She pulls up the covers almost to her eyes, but she can't seem to cover her eyes. Soon another noise comes from the other side of the door. A sniffing noise, like something is checking to see what tasty scents are coming in from inside her door. Daisy's hair is standing on end as she looks ready to pounce. Moments later, a nose pokes through the door, followed by eyes. Soon an entire head is slipping right through the door. A dog's head, but it's definitely transparent, like a ghost. Daisy is now standing, growling, ready to defend Savannah at an instant. Savannah recognizes the ghastly apparition coming through the door. It's Sweetie, the first dog she ever had. Sweetie slips ethereally through the door and is fully in the room. Savannah can't believe her eyes. Sweetie died about 4 years ago. She died in her arms after they came back from vacation. When she went to the vet, they said she had internal bleeding and only had a limited time to live. The veterinarian told them she needed to be put to sleep, but her and her dad couldn't do it. Sweetie came home that night and Savannah stayed up with her in the yard. Sweetie stared into Savannah's eyes that night as she passed away. Savannah cried more then than she had ever cried in her short life. Days passed before the tears finally ceased. She watched her dog, which she had gotten as a puppy, die in her arms. Now, standing before her is the same dog. Exactly the same dog she watched die years ago. "It can't be," she said, and slipped out from under the covers and off the bed. "Sweetie? Is that you, Sweetie?" she asked as she slowly moved toward the ghostly dog. Daisy was still growling as Sweetie turned her head and looked at Savannah with those soft, sweet eyes. She stared into her before time ended. It's how she got the name Sweetie. As she realized her past dog had come back to comfort her, she knew Sweetie wouldn't hurt her. Savannah looked at Daisy, waved a hand at her. Calm down, Daisy. It's okay. This is Sweetie. She's a good girl, too. Daisy sat down, with her mood seeming to calm a little, but not completely. Savannah moved closer to Sweetie and reached out her hand. Sweetie just sniffed and lowered her head, just like she used to when Savannah went to pet her when she was still alive. Savannah moved her hand to pet Sweetie and was surprised to find that her hand rested on the top of her head. She began petting her, and feeling Sweetie's fur under her hand, Sweetie seemed happy her owner still loved her. Feelings of elation and happiness overwhelmed Savannah that her dead dog had come to visit her in this scary place and made everything better. Her petting became more intense, and she fell down on her knees as she hugged Sweetie around the neck. Tears swelled in her eyes, tears of joy and happiness, knowing everything was gonna be okay again. Daisy started to growl again. Savannah knew this must be confusing for her, but she didn't stop hugging her dear old dog. Daisy growled more intensely now. Savannah turned to her and scowled. "Daisy, stop! Sweetie is a good girl." When Daisy only got more upset and stood up in bed, ready to attack, Savannah turned back to look at Sweetie. She was gonna say, "Look, she's fine." But as she turned to Sweetie, she saw something else. The eyes that stared at her in the forest earlier that were red with an age-old hate, which were the same eyes that stared back at her now. Only inches away from her face was the terror she saw before, and suddenly her short life felt way too short to end now. She slowly scooted away as Sweetie turned into something savage-looking. Green drool hung from Sweetie's mouth as though it were infected. Her fur was ragged and looked rotten, as if she just crawled out of a grave before coming inside the cabin. A true hound straight from hell stood before her. Not Sweetie. Savannah was only about 2 feet away from the devil creature when she decided she wanted to live. Savannah heard the undead dog nails tapping on the hardwood floor right behind her as she scooted and turned, thinking she was about to be bitten. She screamed, "Daisy, sick 'em!" Daisy wasted no time at all in flying off the bed at evil Sweetie. Daisy landed on top of Sweetie, and the real fight had begun. Fur, claws, and gnashing teeth ignited in the clash. Growling and teeth clamping were all that could be heard. Savannah needed to get help. Now. She jumped up and ran to her door. She tried to turn the knob only to find it wouldn't turn at all. She started to panic as the fight between her new dog and old dog continued. Daisy held her own, but Savannah needed to get her parents. She remembered she locked the door. She clicked it into the unlock position. Savannah flung the door open and ran into the dark cabin. She could make out the railing of the upper level from the soft moonlight that came through the front windows and a single skylight in the cabin's roof. She saw no other entities around and slammed the door behind her, sealing inside the supernatural dogfight. She ran around the top level to her parents' room, screaming for them. No lights appeared. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Savannah made it to her parents' room to find their door unlocked. She cried and screamed and opened the door. She flipped on the light and froze. Her parents' bed was ruffled, but empty. She looked around and did not see them. Mom? Dad? Nothing. She heard a small chewing noise next to the bed, on the opposite side from where she stood. Another ghastly dog walked out from the side of the bed. It was Max, her dad's old dog. Savannah found him dead of old age one day several years ago. Max looked at her with the same calm look he had when he was alive. Savannah stopped crying immediately, knowing this was just a ruse, just like Sweetie. She smiled and said, "Good boy," backing out of the room. She shut the door softly in front of her and started backing away from her parents' room. She heard the fight still going on in her room as she turned to run to one of the other bedrooms. But where were her parents? A yelp came from her bedroom. She could tell it was Daisy. Demonic growling came next from the room as she heard a loud gurgling noise. Crunching and tearing soon followed. Savannah knew Daisy had just been killed by Sweetie, and she began to cry again. Daisy was a wonderful dog and should have lived a long, happy life. Savannah was at the second bedroom door and about to open it when she saw a nose protruding from her parents' door behind her. Max was sliding through the closed wooden door, and within moments, he was through it. He looked every bit as nasty, if not worse, than Sweetie. His burning, bruised eyes turned and fell on her in a moment. His face was covered in blood. It dawned on her that he was in her parents' room. She pushed that thought from her mind, not wanting to think about what could have happened to her parents. Her spine curled and her stomach lurched as she felt her world coming to an end. She saw Max stalking towards her slowly, knowing she wouldn't escape him. Max was encircled in a pitch-black aura, as if having just escaped from hell itself. She tried the doorknob on the room closest to her parents, behind her, which was locked. Ice filled her veins as panic struck her again. She was about to run to the other room as Sweetie came slithering out from her room. Sweetie was covered in blood. Daisy's blood. Sweetie was drenched in what was left of her loving, loyal dog, Daisy. Her tears intensified. Sweetie saw her and started growling. Behind her, Max started growling too. She bolted to the last room upstairs. As her hand hit the doorknob, she turned the door, throwing it open wide. She dove into the room and came face to face with another dog. Bode stood before her, eyes strong and steady. His eyes held assurance, as if saying he would protect her. Savannah jumped onto the bed in the room as the stoic Bode stood, hair raised and ready to strike whatever came into the room next. The growling outside the room came closer. Savannah could barely see Max's silhouette as he turned the corner out of her view. Two sets of horrid sulfuric red eyes came into the doorway a moment later. Bode growled back furiously, ready to defend her. As she sat on the bed, Savannah wished they had never come to this stupid, evil cabin. One nightly Australian shepherd standing between her and two dogs from hell, wanting nothing but to kill. Sweetie and Max lunged into the room after Bode, but Bode was ready for the move. Bode anticipated it and stepped back when they lunged, causing the two ghost dogs to lose balance and created an opportunity for Bode to strike. Bode snapped forward and grabbed Sweetie's throat, tearing it straight out of its body. No blood spouted from her. However, the attack had some effect as Sweetie fell limp on the floor. Max took the small moment to recover and attack again. He latched onto Bode's ankle and started tearing. Bode yelped and turned to defend himself. Savannah jumped off the bed and ran towards the door with the opening Bode had created for her. She turned to see a whirlwind of fur and fangs colliding in an epic fight of life and death. Savannah knew she had to get help. She ran out of the bedroom and down the stairs. She heard a pitiful yelp and growl. More horrible crunching and gurgling followed the yelp. Bode had just died, giving his life for her too. She had to live. She moved towards the kitchen where she thought home phones were usually located. She stopped suddenly in her tracks. In the pitch black of the kitchen, she sees a figure with glowing red eyes. She can't go that way. She heard noises on both sides of her coming from the living room and the dining room. She turned and looked both ways to see dark figures staring at her with the same putrid red eyes. With nowhere left to go, she turned to the front door. She unlocked it, opened the door, and ran onto the porch. She didn't close the door behind her. Savannah cannot move. She feels as rigid as a statue because what she sees before her was worse than anything she had seen tonight thus far. Red, burning eyes surrounded the cabin. As far as her peripheral vision went, she saw demonic eyes staring back at her. Not just eyes, but all the figures had hideously pitched black auras. The black auras were foreshadowed by the evil eyes that pierced her soul. Standing in the immediate front are her mom and dad, covered in blood. With eyes of embers, they stared at her too. Their bodies looked torn and ragged, just as Max and Sweetie's were. All the figures surrounding the cabin had rotten flesh with hues of green death. As if on cue, knowing their prey has just stumbled into their trap, they smiled. Jagged teeth that shone from the moonlight grinned at her. Their twisted teeth welcomed her home as Savannah felt her body go cold. Sweetie suddenly walked out from between her ragged parents' legs with her throat intact. She realized that Bode didn't really kill Sweetie. She was already dead. That meant Daisy and Bode gave their lives for nothing. And Savannah was dead the moment she showed up to this cabin. Savannah heard the clinking and lip smacking of the hellish creatures coming closer behind her. All the entities around her must think the time for savoring their kill has ended. With her parents and Sweetie in the lead, the group glided towards her with such speed she couldn't even move before the wall of evil fell upon her. From front and behind, all the evil things hit her at once. The cold she felt moments ago was replaced with a warm sensation. Pain embraces her with such ferocity she can't think. She felt her flesh being ripped from her by jagged teeth. Savannah could not scream from the pain. Her bones snapped and muscles tore away from all the hellspawn feasting upon her. The warmth faded slowly, and the red eyes that burned her very soul dissolved away. Savannah took her last ragged breath, seeing nothing but blackness as she died. And if that wasn't enough to chill your spine, I don't know what was. Let me tell you what. When I was 11 and I had that happen in a dream, that was enough to scare me for a long time. I woke up, I hugged my dog, I cried for a while, and then I finally went back to sleep. I remembered that dream, and I still remember it to this day. So thank you all for listening to The Cabin by Joe West. Have a good night. Stay safe, listeners. This has been a story read by Joe West, and it is a Wayaha Fox presentation.